The Protective Insight Podcast, putting the U in human.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Really excited to have our guest here today. If you work in the executive protection industry, you probably have seen him, talked to him, met him at some conference somewhere in around the world. It's kind of EP royalty, in my opinion. Author of 2 books, Corporate Executive Protection and Public Figures' Private Lives. If you haven't read them, check them out after this podcast. But without further ado, we'd like to introduce Christian West of EP Access. Welcome, Christian. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm good. I'm really good. How are you guys?
Oh, fantastic. Being that I think you're the earliest one up here today. so we'll try to work within getting the juices going. But for our audience, for some that are out there that maybe have not heard of EP Access or maybe have heard of you, would you mind just giving just an overview of what is EP Access? You know, why did you create EP Access, and how can people find you?
Well, if we start from behind, finding me is on the internet. It's www.epaccess, and EP Access is a training company, and our primary delivery of training is online training, meaning that we have a bunch of courses that is delivered to you online. That can, of course, not always stand alone. A lot of people, when we started EP Access, a lot of people said you can't do an EP training platform online. You can't train EP people online. We don't need online training. We got a bunch of pushback, but we've been going at it now for 2.5 years, and we've had, what do we have? Just shy of 3,000 people who have taken our courses in one form or another. So I think the result kind of speaks for itself, that there definitely was a need. The interesting thing I think about EP Access is that it's a little bit different than most EP schools, because most EP schools teach you kind of the basic things, the basic 6, 8, 10 things that EP agents needs to know. And of course, everybody needs to know that, but there's so much more to it, right? And I realized a couple of years ago that when you've been doing this for a long time and you get to the other side of 50 and you get to kind of sit back and reflect on the industry and reflect on your career and whatever, you realize that there's a lot of things that you have learned over the years that you would love to pass on. And I just thought it would be a good way to create courses where EP agents don't have to travel to a school, but they can actually do the courses anywhere in the world, and as long as they have internet. And we do a lot of smaller courses where it's more like EP hacks or kind of shortcuts and how to tackle individual problems that every EP agent will face and stuff like that, right? So I guess EP Access, if I have to kind of like shorten it down a little bit so I don't keep talking, is...
Keep talking. Feel free. Keep talking.
Oh, okay. Well, it's kind of like in no way substituting the original EP schools. It's more like an add-on, if you can imagine it.
It's kind of like a force multiplier.
I think so. Because, you know, a lot of people, if we take a perfect example, is driving courses. You know, everybody in the EP world has to have a driving course. And typically, in the old days, if you had a 1 or 2 day driving class, the students would show up on Monday morning, and we would spend from 8 to 10 if the students were really good in the classroom. If they were a little bit of a slow learner like myself, we would typically sit in the classroom from 8 to 11, 11:30 maybe. And then we would go out and drive from 11 or 11:30 till 6 o'clock in the afternoon. And that would give us, 5-6 hours of driving time, and that would give us a certain result. One of the things that we do on EP Access is we take the classroom exercises of it and put it online. So when you show up Monday morning, you have already passed all the theory and all the classroom stuff, so you can go straight out to driving. And that means instead of maybe hitting the front seat at 11 o'clock in the morning. You'll get in the car at 8 or 9 in the morning, and you'll get 2-3 more hours of driving. And the people that are slower learners of the theory part can do it as many times as they want without slowing the class down, right? So online training in executive protection definitely has a place. We just haven't fully figured out how to use it yet, but that's kind of what we're working on.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I've got some ideas for that. We'll have those conversations off air, because what I found is what I loved it is because when you and I met a couple of years ago and had a copy of your book and read it, I had kind of only had known you through LinkedIn, and we had met at one of Byron Rogers' symposiums, and then we had caught up in Miami, and we got to chat some more. But it wasn't until the IPSB, roughly about 2 years ago or so now, that we got talking about EP access. And this is something, Ben, I had been like mentioning to Ben and our other colleagues here at Pro Cypher was, hey, with this pandemic, everything coming on, this really gave us an outside the box thinking, because working in law enforcement in these industries, right, we're fast paced. We don't have a lot of downtime. So when we do training, we need something that we can apply right away. We can access like immediately at our fingertips and try to learn. And it was like, wow, when COVID hit, it was like everyone started Zooming, and it was like, wait a minute, we can do training and certain things like this, virtually. So then it calmed down to where one thing I met when I went to Christian's table at that conference was like, crap, Christian already is doing it. I mean, he's a solutions guy. If you can't tell, Ben, he's an innovator.
Oh, God, yeah.
And we all know when we innovate, right, we get pushback, because it's a phenomenal concept that people aren't grasping, because when it comes to skill-based training, you don't learn a skill in a classroom.
No,
you just don't. You don't learn it by PowerPoint. You learn it by doing. You learn it by trying. You learn it by failing, and finding what works for you. Which is why I love what they did with Pablo, who we had spoken with in a previous episode with AS3 driving, is all that foundational classroom typical stuff that you typically get is online. And you can sit and you get the concepts, and then it's like you get a little refresher. We're at the track, like Christian said, and rather than waste so many hours in a seat in a classroom, which has nothing to do with being a security driver, you need to be in the seat of a vehicle. You need to be doing vehicle inspections. You need to be understanding these nuances. So now you're getting actually more time to build that skill. So when you leave, I feel you actually leave with a foundational skill set now, rather than, hey, I sat through 10 hours of PowerPoint, I drove a car for 3 hours, I get a certificate, and then people think they're a security driver when really they didn't retain any of the information. Wouldn't you say, Christian?
No, I would absolutely say that. And the funny thing is, I've been in this business, as you said, for a very, very long time, right? And one of the biggest weird things that we have in our industry is that we think our industry is really, really special, right? And I would say the people that we look after are typically special, but there's nothing special about what we do, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if you teach people right and the information is out there and stuff, most people can figure it out, right? So if you go in and you dissect training and you go in and look behind training, and I come from Europe, where you actually have, in Denmark, where you actually have to have an education called an adult educator, just to teach other people, because there you learn to understand that you have so many delivery medias, right? But the problem is most of the EP trainers are pretty much self-taught. Yeah, so why would we put science, and why would we put what other people have spent hundreds of years researching on? How do we teach other people the best, right? Because we must be the last bastion that doesn't want to integrate with technology, because we're so special, right? But if you look at it, even a lot of like military things and whatever is starting to use online training, and you teach doctors and pilots and whatever with online segments. But for us, for some reason, no, it doesn't work. We're very special. We're EP.
Yeah, and I feel to you, and what that comes down to, and if I had to shelve it, Christian, and like I said, you've been in this a lot longer than me. I look at it from a little bit younger, a little bit fresher, different perspectives. It really comes down to where we're in an ego-driven field. And what a lot of that comes down to, when it comes to the ego, and then when I actually break the ego down, sadly, in our industry, I correlate it between two things. And if I'm out of bounds, people are going to yell at me. Go ahead. I don't. This is why we're going to be controversial a little bit today. It's arrogance and ignorance, and that's where your ego is. You're either too arrogant to be open and learn and adapt and evolve with what's changing in society. Tech's change. I mean, when you got into this, probably 30 years or more ago now, Christian, right? What you had at your fingertips to use in advance, you probably were using a paper map. You probably where today, where so many people now are using Google, they're using Waze, and they're using all these great tech. But it's like, okay, what if that tech fails? What if you actually go to an environment and you don't have that? We get so reliant on tech, but then you also have the aspects of people get so set in a way that they don't want to adapt. We have some dinosaurs in the industry, and that's okay. And they want you to keep thinking. They want to push innovation, and they preach networking and getting out there. But when you actually sit and talk to them, it's they say it, but the action doesn't back that up.
No.
And then you have these guys, and then what we're having is, rather than, like you're saying with what your training is trying to bring a force multiplier, right? We're trying to bring people in, make them better, grow together as an industry, because reflectively, it's just like EP is just like law enforcement. One person screws it up, we all get the bad reputation. Oh, you're an EP agent, and you had some guy let their client get embarrassed or something happen. We all feel that. We all see it on different videos. So then it becomes, now these other people, then rather than come together, people start, what I see is they start fragmenting it. And I think we're seeing that a little bit today, because we have a couple key different organizations, right? We have ACES. I know you're a part of IPSB, the Board of Executive Protection Professionals. Standalone, the concepts are great, but they're not working together, and it's more of a contest fighting each other. And it's like, man, you all can actually came together, your thoughts and ideas, and actually came together for the benefit of the community and the industry. There'd be some amazing things getting done, but progress always gets halted when you have this. And you got people now that feel like they have to pick sides, and now we can't have a discussion about it, because if you don't agree with this particular group, then you're ostracized from this group. And it's something I'm very disappointed in seeing when it comes to that right now. And you probably got more insight than that, Christian, because you've been in the higher levels of some of these organizations and seen the changes, within it.
Yeah, I have. And the big problem with that is that we're still a young industry, right? And not only are we a young industry, we're also a very niche industry. And, my biggest worry in this is that the more competition that comes on these things, the more fragmented we're going to get, and the lesser we speak to a broader audience, right? The more you kind of like tribalize it, or build camps or whatever, the less we're going to get done, right? But, it's also, when you sit on the other side, it's also kind of a hard industry to be in, because there's a lot of people that talk about conversion, and they talk about evolution, and they talk about us moving forward. But like you said, when you then sit them down and go, so how do we do that? What is true innovation in EP to you guys, right? And then the discussion either goes to guns and knives and defensive tactics, or it goes to training instantly, right? But I'm about to drop a whole kind of like article campaign and stuff like that. That's part of my new book that I just finished, about quality, right? Because there's so many people now that talk about standards, and standards are what they are. I mean, I won't say they're great, but they're good. Just don't expect it to change much, right? Because the minute we have standards, we also have kind of like the lowest denominator dictated, right? As soon as if I go through the standard course in, human engineering, all of a sudden I have the same standard as you guys have, right? So I'm just as good at it as you guys are, because I took the course. Not really, right? There's more to it than that. And the minute we have standards, you kind of like give everybody an equal playing field, and that's good or bad, right? That's not what it's about. It's really about all the companies dictating what is good quality to them, and all the end users saying, this is the quality that we want. We don't really care about anything else, that you guys deliver this quality. Yes, there is a standard, but the trouble with the standards is that most of the professional players will probably already be over that standard.
Mhm.
So all the lower players will now give a standard that they have to live up to, but that still doesn't mean that they're at the level of the professional players, right? It just give them a baseline, and I guess that's good enough, right? But if they have a dictated quality kind of a creed or credo or whatever that says I will do this regardless, that's when you start moving, in my opinion.
It's the diminishment of ego. It's the diminishment of ego, right?
Well, a lot of that is ego, and what I'm seeing too is because like on the other side of having my own small business, but also working a lot in the field and coming across a lot of the new up and comers that have gone to XYZ EP school. I've been very disappointed, and I'm not going to say because I don't want to turn this into like a go after particular organizations and companies because it's not about that. It's just like they need to understand like some of them unfortunately have turned into, in my opinion, certificate mills. People go and pay a good amount of their money, put a lot of their money in. They get out, they graduate, and one kid, for an example, because it sticks in my head just because it falls into checks all my pet peeve boxes. And it kind of touched on a little what you said earlier, Christian, is like they think they met this standard, they got their certificate, and what's the first thing people will do today? They go to LinkedIn, right? And they're proud of that, which is good. Be proud of it. But when you've got a guy that's gone through, he's got only a civilian background. He's got no background other in EP at all, other than this training course. He's done things, nothing to it. And just because he's taken a long rifle course, he's putting on his LinkedIn, he's a SWAT operator. You've never been a cop. I'm a designated defensive marksman. You never worked in the military as a contractor, any understanding or comprehension of it. Just because you took these particular courses with people, all of a sudden they feel like they identify as those instructors that have these experiences and done things. And it's this false sense. And then someone looks at it, and then because the school has a reputation, because it's been around forever, gives that student in. But mind you, you should have checked the box, because right off that LinkedIn and how you write your LinkedIn, with Ben and I being behavioral guys, those are all things right here. Other guys talking industry too. Well, how do we vet a resume? How do we vet a person? Well, there's your start. Look at how they identify to the industry and their training and apply, because this same person told me they were a security driver, but then couldn't change a flat tire on a vehicle. And they went to one of these schools and spent $20,000, Christian. And it's like, you spent all this money, you can't change a tire, but you're a security driver with a certificate. I've got concerns for that.
No, you're absolutely right. And I guess these days it's really important and pretty modern to identify as something else than you really are, right? But on top of that, when I teach and this comes up, right, I usually use this analogy, and it's when you took your driver's license. We all probably have one. Did you apply to be a Formula One driver? Did you send your resume to the Williams team? I mean, you have your driver's license, so why didn't you? Everybody wants to be a Formula One driver, right? Yeah. And they're like, well, I don't have the experience. I'm not a Formula One driver yet. But I'm like, hey, you just took your driver's license. So it's the same thing, right? You're telling me that you took a 40-hour course and you never did anything else, and now you want to work for the richest people on the planet, protecting them, or you want to go to a high-risk operation and whatever. And I'm not saying that cannot be done, because to be totally honest, some of the best agents that I've worked with in my life didn't have much training, right? But they're just the unicorns. So a lot of people have this, I don't know, maybe they're not truly honest with themselves, or else they buy and drink the Kool-Aid, right? And the only thing I can say is for EP and EP training and our industry, it's the same as everything else, right? If it sounds to be too good to be true, that you can pay some money and take a week's course and then you can travel the world. If it sounds too good to be true, there's probably is.
I will say I field a lot of emails and messages from disappointed students at different schools because they were taught networking by somebody or put into the system and plugged, and yet they haven't seen any work, or the work that they have gotten wasn't even EP work. It was like uniformed security guard work. And, and that's disheartening, because it's like, if you're going to put that premise out there, like you're going to do this, then legitimately help these guys, or at least be real with them, because we already are fighting all this stuff that gets glamorized on TV, right? Which is why we're seeing this today, don't you think, Christian? Because it's like EP was one of those things. If you were around it, if you were in the military, you've been in the WHIPS program or done things around, you kind of understood it. But EP was kind of one of those small industries that you kind of knew a little bit about, but you didn't. And then when the pandemic hit, it seemed like all of a sudden, and just from my perspective, all of a sudden it seemed like all those people that were like your entry level, everyone got elevated up a level in the security industry.
Yeah.
It seemed, where all of a sudden
Wow.
EP started booming. People started teaching, training more because they were looking for sources of business, which is fine. But now we have this level. Now we have elevated individuals that particularly we wouldn't see or apply or even be interested in the industry, that now you kind of have to filter through. And then, like you said, these standards, albeit great, aren't the end all be all. We've got standards in everything. In law enforcement in Virginia, my biggest pet peeve in Virginia in law enforcement as an instructor teaching at police academies is that people always will train to that standard. And they actually call it a minimum standard for law enforcement. So when you go to the pistol range in Virginia, you only have to shoot 70% and you qualify. Yeah. And it's like, okay, but under stress, if that actually taking fire in an event where you have to, you drop 30%. So now you're barely passing the 70. Now I don't like those odds in your survival chances. But then when you try to push against the system and go, okay, this is the minimum, the bar needs to be here. So when under stress we fall to the standard instead of below it. And what's going to happen is we're going to create these great standards. They're going to look great on paper. We're going to love them, be like, man, this is great. We now have something to go against. But like you said, the guys that have been operating above the standard, well, that doesn't really quite fit. And no one wants to hear from those guys. And then the ones that are good with the standard are going to be good with it. And then it's like, okay, well, then you're under this false pretense, like that's going to solve the problem because you're just going to create a whole slew of schools that are going to teach to a minimal standard. And now we're going to further water down what we do. And people are further going to lack the understanding. Like you said, the hard skills, yes, are good, but there's so many other nuances. I mean, it's great you can shoot, but have you done it in advance? Do you know anything? Can you do any surveillance work? Any other intelligence work? Regarding the industry.
No, and those are the professional skills, right? Then when you think about it, I mean, in my old company, we had constant presence on offices in 16 countries, and we've been around for a long time. So we probably have had, I don't know, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people go through the system over the years. And I do not remember that I have yet to fire anybody for him not being able to shoot. I don't think I have to fire anybody because he couldn't fit in with the hard skills. But we had to let a lot of people go because their social skills and their soft skills and whatever was not up to standard. They were just assholes to be around, or they would say dumb things to the client and whatever. And we have this kind of weird thing in EP, and I guess that's also in the military and in law enforcement driven jobs and stuff like that. Our loyalty runs deeper than our common sense, right? Because a lot of times we rather want the people that we served with in some capacity to be on our team, even though they sometimes jeopardize the whole mission, right? Because that guy was a douche before and he's probably a douche now, and then the client is an idiot because he doesn't like this guy, right? Or the client's assistant is evil to us because he doesn't like these guys. But then when you go in as a consultant or whatever and look at what is going on this team, you see that these guys are not paying attention at all to what it is that the client want, right? We got to remember that most of the people we work for came to where they are because somewhere along the line, they're pretty smart people, and a lot of them are really, really good people watchers, and they're good at seeing what goes on around them, right? So it can sometimes be hard, right? But when you then look at the training, it's really weird to me that we spend so much time and getting perfect at the hard skills, but nobody really teaches the soft skills. And if you look at what kind of individuals we are, what is it that we do in the weekends? I mean, we go shooting and we go driving, and
it's an all-encompassing practice. Yeah, it's an all-encompassing practice. There needs to be a fine balance between the two, and it feels like in a certain way. I'm going to analogize a little bit, but it feels like in a certain way that there are certain people, areas, businesses, corporations that are looking to privatize certain areas of training and certain ways that they are delivered without the understanding that we are all on the same side here. Right, we are all on the same side. My old combat coach, Peter Ellis, that started Sphere Protection in the UK. He had a great way of putting it. Across the entrance of the door, as you walk in, it would say "No Rambos, please." No Rambos. So as soon as somebody came in, I'm a black sash from this company, from this operation. It'd be get out. I'm not bothered. Get out. And we'd run these drills every now and again with weapons. And he'd be like, so begin as you were, whatever you were doing. And then he'd stop and go, whoa, can't you see I'm wearing a black sash? What are you doing? Where's the chopping and the changing there? And that's the notion of innovation. You know, it might sound like a lofty goal, but you've got to be able to say, I'm not afraid to be wrong. Elon Musk, for all his trials and tribulations, is not afraid of trying things. He's not afraid of trying. And if you punish the innovation side too much, people aren't going to be able to take risks in the future, which is why I love what you've done with EP Access. My first job was, it's duly noted, you know, it's needed. My first job was as a doorman. And because there are only so many companies in the UK that will train you to do that, you have to travel. So that's all this time spent traveling, which is fine. It's part of the course. Then you spend a couple of days there and you go back, and then it's all about trying to get your SIA license, which is fine. But if you can spend X amount of time doing your research, you're swatting up on whatever you can virtually, whatever's appropriate to teach virtually. That way you could step into teaching these new recruits how to speak to other people. That's one that's not even covered, at least particularly with the UK, and that resolves 90% of things. So I'm curious within that particular instance with what you've done with EP Access. Has there been any areas that you've looked at something and gone, well, this has to be more virtual, this has to be more in person, this has to be done side by side, in person, virtual, this kind of thing, in order to make sure the skills are taught as effectively as you can?
I think one of the big problems that you have when you do something like EP Access, it's kind of like a trajectory that kind of goes like this, and then it goes like this. And the minute you go like this, you kind of go away from the original goal of what it is that you're doing, right? Because there's so many courses or so much teaching in the industry that could be done online on things that nobody teaches. Like, if you're a male agent, how do you work around little kids, for instance? Nobody it would be a very hard course to sell as a physical course, right?
Yeah.
Because nobody would travel to the other end of the world to talk to some nannies and talk to somebody about how do you work around kids, right? But it's a great 2-3 hour session online. How do you work with clients who might have a challenged, mentally challenged kid? How do you work around people who are real into animals, right? Some of the clients that I've worked for has always been, for some reason, most of my work has fallen into the, top 50 of the richest people on the planet. And that comes with a lot of kind of like different stuff, right? And when you think about it, a lot of this learning and info that we have gotten over the years that we didn't know, because when I started, the EP industry didn't really exist. It was more of a bodyguard industry, right? And we kind of figured it out, and we kind of grew, and things got kind of better and better, and the industry grew and stuff like that. But all of a sudden you sit back and you realize, and I love it when people come to me and say, I'll be a really good agent for you because I got a diving certificate. right? And I sit there and I go like, so you're telling me that you as a new guy, I should hire you because you have a diver certificate. Okay, cool. If we go somewhere,
Yeah.
we still need to hire kind of like a diving instructor, a safety crew, whatever, because we can't put this on the new guy, right? So instead of thinking at it like this, I always thought to myself, there's so many courses in how do you do that? Do you teach all your guys to be divers, which they probably won't become good enough divers fast enough for the client?
Yeah.
Or do you teach them how to manage a rescue operation and a dive operations from the boat and make sure that if something were to happen, you can call in evacuation and you can have a standby crew on shore and you can have an extra boat out there and whatever, right? But stuff like that is very, very hard to teach in real life, right? Because you don't have a diving boat, you don't have all of these things, but you can teach online how do you manage all of these things. So I think that there's a ton of topics that works really well for online. But I also think that I'm still, when I was with AS Solution, right, we had this saying that operational tempo kills training, because we had kind of a big training budget, but we also had a lot of guys, right?
Right.
And every time we set up a training course, we expected to have 20 people there, and 4 showed up because training kills, or operational tempo kills training, right? But one of the ways that I was looking for was, how can the guys that goes to these training courses be more innovative, right? And my ideal goal, and I guess that's where the idea for EP Access really came from, was that when you go through a course and you come back, make a list that the other guys that go through this course can prepare from, right? Tell them how it is, what to expect, what to bring, be really good, how to get the most out of the training. And when we come back home, let's do a dumbed down version of what this course is that we can put online, so the new guys can see this before they go to the training, so we get more out of it, right? And I think you can, the online, we haven't even seen kind of like the start of it yet. If I owned a shooting school today, I would have people do dry repetitions at home or whatever. I'm not a shooting instructor, but if I were, I would give them some online things they had to complete before they were there. Maybe go through the safety, so we don't have to spend as much time on it at the range. If I was a fitness instructor in the EP field, I would teach the footwork or the basic stance or whatever online at home, or I would. So because what is it people come to me for? They come to me to be hands-on. All right, so why not do a course that's hands-on 8 hours instead of 4 hours in the classroom and 4 hours in the dojo?
Oh yeah, and you're 100% right on that, because one person doing that I know is Tony Blauer. He's created his garage gym, and he's teaching people the basics of spear and those things in his garage. He jumps on. He's in his garage at home with his whiteboards around him, and he's got people live in the groups who are recording, and it gets you prepped. And if you ever decide to go to that live course where he's there and you're putting on the spear suit and stuff, you now can focus on it, because now you've gotten all the footwork and you've understood all the concepts and psychological aspects of it. And I think that's huge. And what I like too is, you're close with Pablo as well, Christian. I like when Pablo brings up the 95% fallacy, and it's what we're touching on, right? Some people harp on all these other things, but what's more common that you're going to come across? You're going to come across maybe a difficult client before you will a shooting scenario, in my opinion. And we're in a solutions-based business, but yet here we are, we're not teaching people how to think solutions-based. We're service-based. And we're also in a position in a group too, where like it's not in our credo per se to say no to a client, is it not? Unless it's going to jeopardize safety or certain matters, our job is to sit there and say, yes, sir, it can be done. We'll figure it out, and we go solve the problem.
Yeah. No, I mean, I always said to everybody that wanted to listen that it's important to understand that we're not in the saying no business. I mean, at the end of the day, because most of our clients, if we say no, they'll probably do it anyway, and they'll either force us to do it or they'll do it without us, right? So we're really in the solution space. I think it's important that people can look themselves in the eye and they can figure out how can we do this in a safe way, right?
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
yes, we can take you to Afghanistan, sir, but it won't be pretty. If you're good with that, we can hire whatever we need to keep you safe, or we can kind of do whatever. And that's really the way to sell it, because the minute that you say no to a lot of these personality types, they'll be like, oh yeah, I can do this. It's my company, whatever, I'll show you, or whatever. There's no point of going there. It's better to say no by trying to sell them on the solutions, right? Saying that, oh yeah, we can definitely go, but I need a $400,000 extra budget or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So give them something to think about, and make them think if you can, right?
Yeah, because you want them to think, and it's like that catch-all, right? Because if you say no too often, too frequently, and especially with no substance, if you're just saying no just to say no just because you don't feel like it today, well, that's not a good business model. You'll be out of business relatively quick. But you also got to look at that in this day and age, in the security industry as a whole, there's so many people looking there and feeding there to pray or get that client, and what do? Is they race to the bottom, which is like another big thing I see issue is, rather than, like, if Christian and I are going into a bid on a contract, we should both be relatively close, our prices, but it shouldn't be Christian's going to start dropping the price tag to get the contract, then I'm going to drop a little credit. And the next thing you know, we're racing to the bottom, knowing darn well neither one of us is going to be able to complete this task, or for this client within the means of the budget, effectively, the right way, with the right people. So that's where we drop standards. We don't bring necessary equipment. And then that's where dangers and safety. But so many people do that. Rather, if we just stay toe to toe and, no, sir, you asked me for the best offer. That is the best offer. You can go ahead with company B, and that's okay. We're not everybody's cup of tea. But when you call me back in a month because company B couldn't do it, just know that the price has gone up, because now we got to come in and fix it, reevaluate, reassess, and it's not going to be the same price you had before. But we could actually push with that without having those. We can push the industry and those standards up in those ways if we did that, rather than look to see how we cut each other. We just did and said, no, this is it. Our guys' safety, all that is paramount. Your safety is paramount. This is it. We're not jeopardizing that for any reason, no matter what. But so many people will, even if it's a penny profit, will fight to drive that thing down.
Yeah, and unfortunately, in all the RFPs and all the bids and all the competition and stuff like that I've been in, prices and personal contacts is probably the main two drivers to win the work. It's very, very rare that you have a qualified discussion about quality and how to achieve it, right? Because it's also hard to dictate or formulate, right? And a lot of both end users and a lot of companies, like I said earlier, has not really sat down and thought about what is really good quality and executive protection to me. I get all this shit all the time. Well, if the client's alive, the quality is obviously good, right?
No, because there's a difference, like you said, between going down the street for a cup of coffee or taking your client to Afghanistan.
There is, but not only that. You can't
compare apples to oranges if the client's alive still.
No, but there's also this whole thing about, oh yeah, but if the client's alive, the quality is good. But then on the other hand, you also have the teams that measure client based on not being in trouble, right? Oh no, the client don't like that. Oh no, we can't do that, because one of the most common things I've hear in this industry when I travel around the country or the world is the guys that go, no, Christian, you don't understand. My client is different. He doesn't like security. And I'm like, oh, really? Show me one that does. Just one. And it's always the same, right? And on the other hand, you have these teams who pretty much either hiding behind the door, or they're not pushing the bar, and then they kind of like compromise security actually more than the guys that are saying, well, if the client is alive, then the quality is good, right? None of them is right, but it's kind of this element where the good EP managers and the good team leaders or whatever, they're always pushing the bar a little bit, right? And they should, because a lot of stuff is not where it's supposed to be, and it's very hard for us to get the right budgets and get the clients to buy in at the right level and whatever. But if you just sit back and let it go, either the team will be in a position where they're not able to protect the client, or they'll be so small that they don't have a budget that is even like realistic for it, right? So I think it's very important that you kind of sit down and figure out what is good quality, but also kind of set some goals, and those goals always has to kind of like be moving. And I'm not saying that it's all about generating more manpower or bigger budgets or whatever, because these days there's also a lot of people that talk about we need to integrate technology and we need to digitalize and we need to do all of these things to get better. But there's very few that actually does it, right? Because then all of a sudden when you find technology that can make your job easier or better or whatever, it's very rare that you also meet an EP company that say, hey, can I sit down with you, dear client? You don't need two guys at night anymore because now we got a really good camera system. We only need one guy, because then the company is losing revenue, right? But even that is kind of a short-term solution, right? Because eventually the client is going to figure out that the second guy don't do shit. And if you're a really good consultant or provider or partner or whatever, what you really should say is like, hey, we don't need two guys at night anymore because now we got really good cameras. So can we move this guy to daytime or on the travel team or whatever, so we get a better solution, right? But most, just like there's a lot of guys that is okay or new in the industry and they have high expectations of what they're going to do. There's also very, very few security companies that are true partners and advisors to their clients, right? Because most of the companies, and myself being guilty of it as well, we would rather sell what the client want than what the client need. And that's another challenge in this industry, right?
It's finding that balance, right? Is because like you can understand and they want it and but they need this, and it's like, okay, well, that's where those nuances, right, of pushing the line a little bit further or the boundary, because we all know most of the time what they want isn't what they need, and then what they need, if it's not packaged the right way, they're not going to want to buy it. So then it's like, here we are, we're playing this kind of game, which comes back to, if you're I would say an EP manager or owner or someone that's going into these discussions, why you don't need to be out in a car driving and shooting as much. You need to be in training and courses where you learn how to have productive conversations, understanding of humans, negotiations, and how we can work these things, which is where, that's where our company, Christian, like we've been that kind of niche, because we have the ability. I can go out and teach you hard skill stuff, but I have trusted partners and guys I'll send you to that'll send it up. But when you sit there and our biggest sell for people is because it isn't so glitzy and glamorous. It's like, well, no one's thinking about these things, but it's like, man, this is really what you need. And Ben and I will sit down and talk, and it's like, wow, you really could have done this better if you just would have maybe just used this word instead of this word, and understanding the words you choose, how you speak them, or just how you present things, can effectively, boost your chances of getting that contract, keeping the contract, or vetting your people the proper way so you don't have those guys. Because what I found is we can teach anybody a skill, right? I can sit and teach you how to shoot and drive. What I can't teach you is the attitude and the mindset that we need to know and understand that role you're working within, right? In order to provide that great service.
Yeah, but it's also a question about, I guess one of the key words we've heard in the last many years has been soft skills. It's all about the soft skills. It's all about the soft skills, right? Then you see all these courses and they don't really teach soft skills. And then you go out and you ask all the end users or whatever, what is soft skills to you, right? And nobody have those written down either, right? I mean, what is the soft skills that you need, and where does soft skills become personality traits, right? Because if you want to be really good, and it actually also goes in with innovation these days, right? Because if we want to be innovative and we want to move forward and we want to integrate technology or whatever, that starts with us recruiting people that are curious to technology, right? Because remember when social media was a thing, you would pick somebody in your sales team and say, you're the social media guy. And then he'll be like, okay, I'll learn it. Instead of us going out and hiring our sons or daughters or a teenager or a social media manager or whatever, right? It's the same. All of a sudden, soft skills have become a buzzword. And when you sit down and ask people, so what is soft skills to you? They come up with shit like, it's advances and it's everything that doesn't hit people, or it's everything that's not hard skills and whatever. And I go, you don't think personality traits and who you are as a person and how you dress and how you stand and how you either have an open posture or a closed posture or whatever has anything to do with soft skills? And they're like, I didn't think about that. That's not what it's about. And whatever.
But then when you but then when you bring it up, it's like you're crazy for that, right? Because they look at you like you're like, what did you say?
I use this saying. I go, what is a hard skill for an accountant? It's math, right? It's doing your books and whatever. Where for us, I've heard people say soft skills. Yeah, that's like doing expense reports and stuff like that as well. And no, don't get me wrong, we got to be good at that. But technically, that's also a hard skills if it's something that you can learn, right? I mean, to me, soft skills and personality traits are very, very closely related, right? So it also goes back to
those are keys.
Yeah. I mean, have you guys seen any EP companies that has a personality test that's tailored to EP? How come? I mean, everybody else has personality tests.
The thing is like we have those things. Like when I mentioned with Byron when we were at that forum this past December, Christian, when he brought up sitting down there about resumes and vetting and like, oh, this guy looks great. How do we do this? And I'm like, obviously you don't spend enough time talking to me, not to toot our horn, but that's what we do with our company. Like we can do credibility assessments. We do those things. We'll look at a resume. We'll look at these profiles. We'll conduct those things for you. And we'll put a package for you. So when you sit down and now you sit down with that candidate face-to-face, Christian, now you have all this to look at and go, okay, this guy may not particularly work with the client, right? And that's what the biggest issue we have too is what I think we're going to find as another issue with the industry is once you get the standards and standards are great, again, we're trying to take people and put them in a box. You went in there, you went to this course, you're in this box, you checked all this, boom, you met the standard. However, when we put that person in with a particular client or put them into a particular family office or somewhere there, one, they're not meshing with the team. They're not working well with the client. Like you just said there, they don't work well around the spouse of the client or their kids. But these are all things we could have picked up on. But it's like, hey, this guy was a tier 1 operator. He has XYZ background. He's completed all these schools. He checks all the boxes. But he's a terrible teammate. You know, he's not what we need for this particular role. He may be good. We might be good putting him in a surveillance role and put him where he's doing that and giving us protective intelligence or doing something there. But maybe he's not the guy that I want to put on the team with the client or even work for us at all, because we all know morale can kill your team and kill your company.
Oh, easily. But then there's also the other thing, and this is one thing that I've been doing a lot of kind of like internal processing on, because it's something that I kind of want to have kind of like coined and phrased, right? But I would almost bet you if you have 20 teams out there and the 10 of these 20 teams, the client decides that, hey, you guys should come work in-house, right? The client almost always picks the least experienced people because they really like him. And why is that? Well, that might be because the least experienced people kind of go for the wrong things, right? If you're really good at being an EP operator, you don't put yourself in a place where the client likes you too much. Because then you know it's dangerous, right?
It's a fine line.
They don't like you too much anymore.
Personal professional.
Exactly. So why is it that the client always picks the least experienced people to go in-house or to move to their private teams and whatever? It's because these people offer up the things that the client wants to hear, right? You can look at it like this. I mean, this is a great example. Back when I used to work in the celebrity industry, you would be in the tour bus, and it was I don't know, 11 o'clock at night, and we don't have a show that night, but we've been driving forever, and we come to any town. Let's say you come to Reno, Nevada, and you're about to drive into Reno, Nevada, and it's always the drummer. He gets up to the two EP agents in the front and say, "Hey, what's going on a Wednesday night in Reno?" You know, the old guy, he looks at him for a little bit, and then the young guy always comes out first and go, "Oh, there's this nightclub, this nightclub, this nightclub, and that restaurant. We should really go there." Where the old guy looks at him and goes like, you know, on a Wednesday night, probably nothing. Right? Because there's no point of putting ourselves up for that, right? But it's the mindset of the young and the old, right? And then it's the mindset of, but it's also the mindset of the companies, right? Because I've never to this day found the perfect background for EB. Some of the best guys I know have zero background, and some of the best guys I know have all the background in the world, right? Because it's kind of like the whole thing of saying that culture eats skills for breakfast in a company. It's kind of the same thing here, right? Personality for this job and being a people person is hard to teach people, but being a people person takes you further than any training I know of.
Do you find that? Sorry to jump in, Jim. Just as a curiosity.
Speak. You haven't spoke hardly.
I've been letting you go. Do you find then that, like, forget all of the skills, forget the hard skills, forget the soft skills, forget any other kind of skills that you want to call them? Do you find then that there is a core type of person, like a blueprint kind of thing, that is better suited towards the EP ideal than any other kind?
Yes, but I can't tell you what it is. But if I see one, I can show it to you.
Got you.
If you know what I mean, because
yeah,
you know, it's but it's also you know, it also goes down to the identity of the team and the identity of the client, right? And that's another thing that a lot of security companies, in my opinion, have a very hard time understanding, and we did as well in AS Solution, because it's not easy at all. But you got to figure out, if you look at a client, the client has a certain look and a certain feel. The company the client represent has a certain look and a certain feel. And I mean, with all due respect, if it's a tech startup and the CEO and the founder and whatever are young, dynamic people who try to push the bar, maybe a 58-year-old retired law enforcement officer who never left that police force is not the right thing, I mean, for that client, right? And a lot of companies fail to understand that, because this guy was so good with the other clients he had. But guess what? I don't know. I mean, when you think about it, the principal doesn't know what they don't know, right? And they don't really care about what we do, because, you know, when you get somebody to build you something, you have an idea of what it's supposed to look like. If you get somebody to fix your car, you have an idea what it's supposed to sound like and all of that. The only inputs that the client gets on EP is what they see on TV and movies and whatever. So a lot of times the clients come into this with a totally misscrewed view of what we do too, right? So if the companies hasn't sat down and figured out, hey, this is the type of protectors, or this is the type of agents that this client would probably like. You know, there's a big difference. And just because you work well with client A and B doesn't mean you work for client C. And a lot of times we actually put the agents kind of in danger a little bit, because we're so busy filling ranks, right? And that's not fair to anybody. So I think I have an idea of what type of people would work once I see the client. But, you know, I'm just as wrong as everybody else, right? And it's very hard for me to put down on paper what our agents needs to look like, if that makes sense.
Totally. Totally, I completely get it, and it's something that, as Jim was saying earlier, that it's similar things to we encounter. We're kind of fighting against this stereotype that if you see one particular move, it means this, and if you see
Yeah.
them do this facial expression, then it means this. The simple fact is you don't know. You don't know. You have to explore these kinds of things, and
Yeah.
I was interested to hear about what the corollaries would be between these two areas. Of one is completely behavioral based, and one blurs the lines between an abundance of skills, but there is that thing that runs underneath, that there's no hard and fast rule. You've got to engage, and as Jim would say, you've got to validate, dismiss, or clarify what it is that you're noticing, and how that affects the situation.
No, but it goes back to an example. You mentioned that you used to work the door, right?
Yeah.
Everybody used to say that you don't have to be a big guy to work the door as long as you can get the job done.
Yeah.
The only problem with being a little guy is you just have to work a little bit harder in the beginning until you get the reputation, right? And it's kind of the same in EP. The big people typically have to learn how to tuck it in and blend in, where the small people typically have to learn how to step it up so they're still trustworthy, right? And it's that whole interaction that can be so hard.
But even then, Christian, right? Wouldn't you even beg to differ that sometimes bigger isn't better, right? It kind of depends, because what I'm seeing is, like, if you're celebrity protection and you're out there because you've come to find like a lot of these people that are, entertainers and musicians and stuff, like the big burly bodyguard type look. But sometimes, man, that shorter guy that's got the background, that can talk to people, that's great, that can just like zip in. And I'll even use you, Christian, as a great example. You're not like a huge guy or a small guy, but what I've loved when I first met you was so many people, when you go to these different conferences, are dressed to impress and dressed to nines. And what I love about you, Christian, is that you're so down to earth, but people know you just off of the black t-shirt and the jeans. Right? It's like that. That's the Christian West signature look. Everyone else will have a jacket and suit and everything on, and people will gravitate toward Christian just right because it's different. But I could use Christian, plug him into a covert detail, or the client doesn't like the look of security around them. Then why do I want to put these big, burly, beefy guys around them and make the client uncomfortable, or not? We're not meeting his wants now, right? When we can do these different things, and it's like we're playing chess, wouldn't you say, Christian? And we're moving pieces on the board, and sometimes a piece doesn't need to be moved, another piece does, in order to blend in, to provide that maximum security in that moment, in that environment for our client, and doesn't need to be the big guy.
No, and I think it's the right word to say that they're I don't know. I don't know if I want you to use the word diversity these days, but diversity in EP teams is super important too, right? And we're really, really bad at it. And it's not, I don't mean only diversity in people's ethnicity, but there also needs to be diversity in how the teams looks, right? Yeah. One of the biggest misunderstandings I think we're dealing with at the moment is everybody says we need female agents, we need female agents, we need female agents. Absolutely we do. But there's also jobs where they have to work harder to blend in, right? And there's jobs where they can do it 100 times better than I ever could, right? And it all comes down to also no clients are alike, right? And no details are alike, and no teams are alike. And you know as well as I do, Tim, probably from the military or law enforcement or whatever, just because you're on a team doesn't necessarily mean that the team works, right? So there's also this whole thing of teaching teamwork and teaching how to collaborate on a team and all of that stuff, right? Which, again, is something that nobody's teaching, nobody's talking about, right? So I think one of the big problems that we have, if we kind of want to get up in the helicopter, is that EP is in many ways special, but it's not, right? And the big problem that we have is we have so much baggage that has been handed to us. This is the way we do it. This is the way we do it. This is the way we do it. And most of our knowledge is really generational. It's not always proven, right? I mean, one of the funniest things that I've ever heard was, or one of the examples that somebody gave to me is, the client needs to sign a document, and somebody hands the client a pen, and he signs the document, and he goes, "Oh, this is a nice pen." Somebody runs with that and go, "The client only pilot pens, because he really likes it." And all of a sudden, there's pilot pens everywhere, and nobody can write with anything but a pilot pen. And one day, the client goes, "Why do we have all these pilot pens around?" And somebody goes, "I thought you really, really freaking liked them." And he goes, "I don't fucking care."
It's a
But
pen.
instead of asking the client, "What do you like?"
Yeah.
or actually figuring it out, we go with all these assumptions, right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
a lot of times, luck is not luck, and not being in trouble is not quality.
No.
That's just it. I think you hit the nail on the head there. And to come back to like what Ben and I have the pleasure of doing, we enjoy it. It really comes down to humans, right? The human aspects, and it's like, again,
It does.
we're back to this. We're back to the same thing, Ben, that we've been talking about, right? Can't put a human in a box. We can't put
Nope.
them in a box and say this is an EP professional, and we keep shipping the same box out.
Yeah.
Right. When it comes to EP and really any industry, yeah, we're going to put them in a box, but the box is going to be a different size and shape every time because it has to meet the client's expectation, the client's needs. Like you're saying, Christian, 100% true. What stands out more? Someone looking like me at a park with a client's kids, or a female agent, right? That particularly looks a part of a nanny, and me standing, it doesn't look right unless I have the ability to adapt and maybe make it look like I'm part of that group and not a security professional. But you know how hard it is to create that dynamic, because what if we entirely don't look alike at all? So it's like, you got to be able to blend, fill and flow. And I think the biggest thing, Christian, is going to come down to our attitudes, right? We got to be able to allow ourselves to be molded and adapt, because that's part of our job, right? Being solutions based, we put out a lot of fires. We do. Ben, as we go back and saying, right, we will start with a plan. We'll have this great plan. We'll talk about this plan, but a plan never survives first contact, which is why we got to have contingencies, and that what if game comes in. But then sometimes there's that anomaly that pops in that isn't part of the contingency that we were planning for. So now it's like, crap, the client threw us a curveball. We thought we planned for the curveballs, but he gave us a sneaky one where we're like, we got to send somebody to run and go get something and do now, or get a different car or a particular thing, or go to a different venue. We haven't had an opportunity to advance. So how are we shifting and moving, filling and flowing the team in order to maximize these things? And if you got a guy that's sitting there going, no, this is my role, and they pound their fists, and some do, I'm good at this. And it's like, no, you should be able to fill any part of the team, embrace any part of it. Because I'll add this, Christian, Ben and I in the previous conversation talked about him starting as a doorman, and I believe you have experienced that as well.
That was my background
and
too.
A lot of people look at these entry level things, right? Because when we first get in, everything's entry level. But so many people look at it as a particular thing. But those are some key foundations, I feel, that probably have built you, Christian. I know they've built Ben with creating these skills of understanding people. You may not maybe point to a theory, because there's a lot of things that I can't point to, but you can look at a person, you can get that feel, that vibe off them to go, okay, this guy's going to be a problem. This guy's not going to be a problem. This guy's a good fit for our team. I can trust this guy to have my back. We start creating these mental things and these neural pathways and these files for ourselves of going, okay, this is what's going to work and not going to work. And then you start being more proactive, and you get better at predicting these behaviors when you're at that door. And those are all elemental skills that turn into advanced skills and way beyond as we start moving through EP, going from an RST to a travel team. It all comes back to that foundational level that you built on that we should never neglect.
I totally agree, and one of the analogies that I always make bound to the people that work the door, right? You have a really, when you're a bouncer, right? Because you think you can kind of like, you can take out anybody, right? This is my town, I got this. Then you do that for a little while, and you realize that there's always somebody out there bigger, stronger than you. So as you get older in this job, you don't get there to fight. You get there to avoid fights, right? And you figure out the way to avoid fights is to be proactive, right? Because when you stand there, and it's really interesting because I went from bouncing and a side note of loss prevention. And then I got into this EP team and my career started to take off. And then all of a sudden I got invited to some pretty hard courses, like real like special forces instructors and government agency instructors and whatever. And they teach all these facial expressions and behaviors and whatever. And eventually they pull me aside and say, have you done this before? And I go, no, but that's how you see this guy is about to catch off or flip off and start fighting. I mean, he starts touching his face, his eyes get dilated, and he has all these, in Europe we call them over expressions, right? You can see that. The way you catch a thief in a supermarket is to look at where are their hands placed, do they walk the wrong way, do they do all of these things? And not to decline anything, right? But it ended up with me actually teaching a lot of these instructors who just had the military or the police way of it, right? Because a good loss prevention officer can catch pocket thieves and all kinds of pickpocketing and whatever, because they all send out the same expressions, right? And you and I, Jim, has talked about this a million times, right? So I think that whatever job you were in before, you can learn a lot, but no matter what, it makes you an adult, right? And that's needed when you're in the EP too, right? So I don't think, to this day, I haven't found the perfect background, right? And that's one of the things we struggle with in this industry, because for some reason, the more hardcore backgrounds we can find, the better we think people are, right? But truth of the matter is, I mean, I made a career out of waiting for people. Right.
And that's the key aspects of EP, right? That people fail to understand is like, I have to sit in a. I mean, if you're in DC, part of your job as a security driver while your client has a meeting is you might be circling that block because there's no parking for hours until they come down and bring them up, because there's no parking in DC. Yeah. You go time real quick, grab you a snack while you fill up, because you're probably going to run out of gas before anything else, and that's your job. And it comes back to, like, I like to tell people, brilliant at the basics, right? If you can't be brilliant at being bored and not allowing yourself to be complacent, staying alert, vigilant, picking up on your surroundings, things, and moving work within a team, then this is not going to be the career for you, because it's not all the great stuff you see by influencers and social media. You need to get the right skills, the right attitude, and just embrace that and get the boast of it. Like, while you're there driving in circles, look at the environment. You know, what's going on around you. Become a better observational, skilled person.
No, but it's also, again, a question about not only becoming a better observational, skilled person and whatever, but also understand your clients, right? The clients came to where they are because they do what they do. So a lot of times when we as operators can get annoyed with changes in our travel program or changes in the agenda, and we're not having all the information and all of these things that can piss us off, and we can be almost like so annoyed that we want to quit and whatever, because what is this shit? We never get what we need, and we can't do this and we can't do that. You got to get up in the helicopter and say, the reason why they're not telling us, because they pay us, right? So they have an expense of us being here. The reason why they not tell us is probably because they don't have it. And if they have it and they don't tell us, it's probably because it's not finalized. Or you know what? Maybe we're not supposed to know yet. It's not fucking magic, you know. It's not science. It's actually really, really simple. Don't get annoyed over it, because look at it like this. I just took a first-class flight from, let's say, LA to Tokyo. And they're telling me the client is not coming because something changed. Well, look at it like this. I got paid to fly here. Now I got a day in Tokyo before I can catch the flight home. And when I come home, I have 2 days off because I flew to Tokyo. Can you tell me again what's bad about that?
There's nothing. Stoicism comes close to it. There was a phrase that I liked from it, which was, there are two types of problems in the world: things you can solve and things you can't. Why would you worry about either?
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. It's brilliant.
Yeah. So
Yep.
I think
It's all about your mindset and that whole perspective. But if you've got the right guys on your team and they understand these nuances, we go 0 to 100 really quick is the same as we can go 100 to 0 really quick.
no, exactly,
Sometimes there's no intermiddle part, right? Sometimes it's all gas or all brake. There's not a balance, and you just got to be able to go, which is why you find your spots when you can to take a bathroom break or carry a snack in your pocket, because you're not going to have a chance to sit down and eat a meal. Know your client, right? Because if you know at the drop of a hat he can go to a secondary or third meeting, even though it's not on your itinerary, we know how he works, and if it's leading up, we should be planning or at least have some kind of idea that we're going to be
of
moving to
course,
take advantage of the downtime when you have it.
absolutely, absolutely. But when we really think about it, that's also what makes this kind of career field so intriguing and at the same time so exciting, right? Because I know for myself, I've had the chance to retire a few times if I wanted to, but I, I don't know, man. I still love this business more than anything because of exactly what we're talking about here, because it's fun, right? It's
Oh,
You
it's
find a
it's
job you love and you don't
kind of
work a
fun.
day, right?
Exactly, it's fun to
and
deal
I
with
love
all these
having you,
problems.
Christian.
Huh?
Yeah, and I love having you too, because this is just great, because people need to hear, because sometimes I feel that the people that need to be heard aren't getting heard enough. And that's like why we
No,
wanted to come on and do this podcast, because it's like we want to bring this awareness to everyone out there that's listening. And we're going to have to bring you on for another episode. I don't want this to drag on too, but I want to dive in hopefully next time to get into the entrepreneur side of it with what you're doing, because I feel
oh
not only
shit,
the
yeah, we
training
didn't even get
aspect
there,
of what
huh?
you've done. Now, well, we're a little over an hour in, and it's just we put it, but this is a necessary training, because I feel people can pull out of this why EP Access is here, why it's important, how it's evolving, what it's doing to innovate, and how it can just make people in general better. And the conversations we've had, it really comes down to the human aspects of it, right? We're trying to get this out there, although we're geared into security, and that's where we're all at, but we'll have a broad audience here with where we're getting this out to, and we can surmise this into, like, just again, humans can't be put in a box, no matter what
That's
industry.
hard.
And we try with things, and it's like we're
They just
nuanced,
fight
body
to get
language
out.
isn't a language. It's
Yeah.
like we got to get it out there and just be authentic, be yourself. That'll seep through, and you'll find your right spots and the right roles. But if you have the right attitude and the right mindset, we can give you
It'll take you far. It'll
skills.
take
I
you
can
far.
teach
I
you
mean,
skills. Yep, it's really
personality
far.
and,
Yep.
and mindset and positivity will take you far.
Oh, huge gratitude. And that's what I started trying to get guys out there too. Like you were saying, when you got that thing, you jumped off. First thing I would do when I landed in Tokyo is, man, thanks, man. I got to see Tokyo. I didn't have to
Yeah,
pay
exactly.
for it. Like you said, I mean, I got a day here, relax, man. This is to me, that's the best job.
You don't find
Exactly.
that
The
in an
client is
office,
not
do
I
you?
don't see a
Eh?
complaint. I
The
really
client is
don't
not
see
coming. Great. I got a whole
yeah,
day
I
for
don't see
myself.
that.
Right?
Yeah, I don't see the complaint in it. But like you said, though, but there's just some people, no matter what, we're never going to make happy.
Nope.
Not everybody is going to be 100% happy anywhere in this industry, no matter what we do, no matter what we do to progress. All we can do is give them the best options. And what I love when I go through your stuff, Christian, is you can feel it, you can sense it, you can hear it, the immense that you want to give back to this industry, what you're passionate about, the people you're passionate about. You want to see them succeed, and you're trying to give them, and I don't even want to say experience, because you're beyond experience at this point. You're seasoned. You have an amassed amount of wisdom, and that people need to just
Yeah.
kind of hear it and get it out there, because it's there. Like a lot of your nuggets, as simple as people may think they might sound, when you apply what you have learned through your trials and those failures with those successes, can really help that young new guy, even the experienced guy, of going, hey, just stop and listen for a minute, put your ego down. Like there is a ton of nuggets in this podcast alone that guys in this industry can take from you being willing to share with us.
Hey, I mean, if you look at my career path, I've learned from some really, really awesome people. And then I was lucky enough to run a company where I could hire a bunch of awesome people that worked for a multitude of different clients, and we all learned from each other. What we brought to the table that were really good was the guy that we embedded with somebody probably knew how 5 other teams would do it, so they had a wealth of information. But then at the same time, this guy came to a team where they had a different principles, they had different operators, and if you listen, right? I mean, I usually say one of the hardest skills in life is to actively listen to people. But when you really listen to what these people could teach us, that's really how you become good at it, right? Even when you listen to the people who have zero idea of what they're talking about, you know that that's not what I want to do, and that's not what we should be doing, right? But it's still, you still learn something. I mean, at least you know that that's not what we're supposed to do, right? So listening and being open-minded and whatever is key.
To the listening end, I'm sorry, mate. To the listening end, I'm wondering if anybody listening to this podcast so far picked up on the fact that you, Christian, earlier mentioned that you got a new book you were working on that was finishing up. I'm wondering if there's anything that you can tell us about that at the minute, whether it just or feel free to tell me to sod off if it's completely under wraps, you know.
No, well, I just finished my new book, which is my third book, and it's the first book I've written all by myself, which I can't give enough props to my co-writers on the first 2 books, because writing a book alone is a ton of work for me. But again, it's about corporate executive protection and family office protection. And in this book, I kind of take it a little bit further. I have kind of come up with these theories and charges and whatever on how we can be better at what we're doing and how we can modernize what it is that we're doing. And I originally set up to kind of do a new version of the first 2 ones, but then I realized that the first 2 books, the first one is over 10 years old. So doing a new version of a 10-year-old book would put me in the same box as the people who teach what they learned 100 years ago. In 10 years, I would say, and this is actually a kind of a fun fact, in my opinion, for EP, 10 years ago, what I wrote 10 years ago is probably 70% wrong today. That's how much our business and our clients and whatever has moved forward, right? And that's why I realized that instead of doing a remake of the first 2 ones, I needed to do a third one that kind of takes into account all the things that changed before pandemic, with pandemic, and after pandemic. And then on top of that, I think there's a lot of things that's kind of interesting, right? I mean, if you look at the clients of the future, it'll probably not be the IT companies, and it'll probably not be that. The clients of the future will probably be, if you look at Fortune 500, for instance, in 10 years, there's been a total generation change, right? Bill Gates and those guys that used to be on top of it is in the middle of it, right? And the new billionaires of the world do electric vehicles, and they do virus vaccination, and they do all of these things, right? So that means that focus for the next, 10 years will probably be on a different type of business, right? So I think it's super important, and I think we can learn a lot from that, right? And that's why I thought writing a new book about corporate executive protection and how to build your team and be a leader in this industry, I think that was important, and that's why I did it. And it's finished. I have it with the illustrator and the publisher. So hopefully I'll have it late September, but it might be a stretch. I might not have it before the conferences in December, but I'm excited about it. So, and don't ask me the title.
I'm going to need to add to my collection because I've got the first 2.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
I've got the first
I don't have a title for it yet, but hopefully soon.
But what I love too, what I heard you say, Christian, which to me means a lot, and it says a lot about you and your character and where you are on your journey. I've noticed so many people that have written books years ago, rather than write another book and admit, like you just said, about 70% of what I wrote is probably wrong today. We've evolved so much. Most people will just do a revision of that first book and update it, and it makes it look like I've been right all the time, where I'm looking forward to this because now I want to compare it to the books.
Yeah, exactly.
Go, wow, this is where we were, this is where we came from, this is where we're going. And I think if more people shared like you just did and out there and admit we're not going to be right, we're human, we make a lot of mistakes, but just put it out there. People say, look, I'm not doing a revision. I'm writing a third book. And I probably was wrong a lot, which most of us can agree. And if we have spouses or significant others, they'll be the first one to tell us we're probably wrong more than that.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
But you got to remember that I had co-authors on the first two books, so they were probably the ones that were 30% right, and the 70% wrong was probably me. So, no, but I mean,
Yeah.
I just think that, if it's, I don't know, for me, it's kind of like, I love this business. I mean, I don't know how I still is this passionate about it 30 years in, but I am, right? And I still think that I have a lot to contribute. I think the business is super exciting. I mean, we started out in a business where there were bodyguard teams here and there. There was very far in between. So it was all about, once you made it on a team, it was all about not getting fired because it was very hard to find a new job. Then we kind of rode into the first wave of corporate executive protection, which was kind of like, it went from bodyguards to EP, and then it became EP 2.0. And I think we're heading so fast towards EP 3.0, which in my opinion will be when we come out and we figure out, is there going to be a recession? Is a lot of these teams going to be cut down in size? Yes or no? I actually necessarily don't think it's a bad thing if we kind of like plateau a little bit, because the last, I don't know, 5 years or so, it was a little rough, right? Because a lot of people got hired that should never have been hired, but there were so many jobs that, again, quality wasn't that important. It was more important to fill ranks. And that blew salaries and the enticement and whatever, it blew it out of the water. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing if we plateau a little bit, because once we get to the other side of whatever this is, it will go back up like the rest of the world. So I think we're standing right on the edge of EP 3.0, and that is where we have to figure out to do the same with less. And I'm actually super excited for that, because it'll weed out a lot of people that is not supposed to be here. And maybe we'll finally get to that technology integration that we all been talking about and haven't done.
Yeah. The next big evolution.
It's kind of like what you said, Christian. All the guys that say this is the way we've always done it. That's in a ton of industries, ton of organizations, and they will talk about change but be resistant to it up until the very point they can no longer be resistant to it. And that's what it seems like it's coming to, right? From what I'm listening to you saying, is we're almost at that point to where you're going to have to embrace tech one way or the other, because tech's not going nowhere. It's a main way of life right now, and you're going to have to adapt, or unfortunately, it sounds like get out of the industry.
Yeah, and I don't know, man. It's one of those things where you have so many tools now that can either make you super successful or pretend like you're super successful. Right? And
got to fight not to name who they are.
You're right, exactly. But also, it's kind of funny because people come to me and they go, ain't you afraid of that chat CPG? Because now everybody can write about EP like you do. And I go, I think chat CPG is kind of great and fun and whatever. And the people that use it to write all their stuff for EP, which I'm sure somebody will, they're going to have such a hard time to deliver that I'm kind of like, no, I'm not scared of chat CPG. Let them use it, because at the end of the day, that'll probably show really quickly. If you wrote your brochure, your contracts, your whatever on chat CPG and you can't deliver. So I'm not scared of it at all, because there's nothing I can do about it. So here it is.
I would say you can almost equate that to the people that have met each other online, like on an online dating platform, right? And they looked at that profile picture and they go meet in real life, and the profile picture doesn't match what you see from your eyes.
It's kind of like the filter, right, or whatever. Stuff. I like it. That's
they wrote all this great stuff, but then when you get to have that business meeting, you come to find out that they don't even know anything that they gave you in the paper that they wrote.
It's a plastic trophy.
But with that, Christian, we're gonna wrap up this episode. We would love to have you come back and get more into your story, how you started this business. I want to get more into that fire you got in your belly that's got you passionate and talking, because we could talk
We could
probably
keep
all
going.
day if our schedules allowed us.
Oh yeah,
keep going.
we could keep going all
And
day.
I
But
absolutely
yeah,
love
sorry
it.
if we kind of derailed the conversation. But
No,
let me
no
know.
need
I
to
would
be sorry,
happy to come back.
because this is all information I
Yeah.
feel it needs to get out there. People need to hear it. They need to understand that there are guys in this industry. There are guys out here that are authentic and care, passionate, such as yourself, that just want to share that information, share that experience, and just for the betterment of the industry, the betterment of people involved. We just overall just want to make you a better human, give you a different perspective,
Yeah.
give you a different way to look at things, a different way to look at your training, how you're applying your training. You know, EP Access is one of those. It's on a hybrid. I mean, if you're not following, not looking at any of Christian stuff, I'm challenging you to do so and look at it, because you'll find as it continues to evolve, it's only going to get better. It's already great, especially if you start taking some of the stuff there with AS3 and get to do their classroom stuff and then actually go to the track. I got to personally take part of it. I loved it because I was able to do those modules, being a driving instructor, and just go out there and just focus on those things. Christian, you give great stuff. I believe you even have one on advances where you have a class they do hybrid, and then they come out and see you live and in person out there in Vegas and do the actual advances. So there's stuff to get out there that you can fit in your schedule. Do it. There's no reason not to. There's so many classes that are on there that you can do just virtually, that just do them in your downtime. You know, on your Wi-Fi on a flight, always put something, invest in yourself, invest in that training.
I used to tell people, even if they sit and wait in a car outside the boss's house or whatever, I mean, some of the classes are 15 minutes long. Some of them is 8 hours long, right? And, you know, the good thing about doing it online is also that you can get it down at a price point where you don't have to like spend a fortune on training, right? And you can use it as kind of like an appetizer, right? Where hopefully I can help open people's horizon to that there's so much stuff. I mean, I still go to training classes all the time, and I've been doing this for 30 years, right? But there's so much new stuff out there, and there's so much different things, and there's so many things that I don't know about, right? And I hope that we can help with this platform to point people that way.
I love that.
Awesome.
I always come back to the sorry, just a last sentiment.
No.
I love reading about the Greeks in terms of their philosophy and whatnot. Plato, Aristotle, Aristophanes, all of them. And Aristotle's apparent last words on his deathbed was, "All I know is that I know nothing." And I think that's such a wonderfully curious attitude about the world to have, for a guy that's done so much on paper, to have said on his deathbed, "All I know is that I know nothing." So we can always be learning, we can always get better, we can always keep sharpening our axe.
Absolutely. So man,
well,
I've really enjoyed this conversation. It was fun.
As have I, and I'm sure Jim has as well. But guys, it's been more about you, as it always is. The you and the humans in this particular scenario are you guys watching, taking notes, making sure that you're going to track down Christian through epaccess.com. I mean, who doesn't want to learn from an EP wizard? Right, that's been in the game.
I don't know about that, though. But...
Oh, come on. Accept the compliments. You're too humble. Deal with it.
Well, hey. All right. I'll object, but I kind of like it, so it's okay.
No, I appreciate you for coming, guys. And do make sure that you're following EP Access on all of their channels to get more about the book when the information comes forth, hopefully in September as well. And if you've enjoyed the podcast, you can really show us some support by clicking the like button, clicking the subscription button and the bell so you're notified when all new episodes are promoted. It drops on Spotify, Google, Apple, anywhere you can get the podcasts. It's a simple thing, a simple task that you can take charge of that really helps us, and we'd be very grateful for your support. So, Christian, thank you again, sir. And Jim, always a pleasure, and we'll talk to everybody soon.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Take care, guys.